All right, guys. Thank you for joining us today. So today's we've got very good session. It's going to be jam packed, filled with a lot of information. But today we've got Mustafa Kadioglu, a lead data scientist at Cisco. He's been at Cisco for 6 years, which is 18 years in the world of AI, and he's going to talk to us about Cisco support case management system, which has been built with RAG and is also an agentic AI application. So today you're gonna hear from Mustafa. He's gonna go through some slides. Then he's gonna show us a demo of this tool. And me and Mustafa are just gonna nerd out, and I'm gonna ask him some very good questions. But for now, Mustafa, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you so much, Richmond. Thank you so much for having me today. Hello, everyone. My name is Mustafa Kadioglu. I'm a lead data scientist with Cisco. I have, as Richmond said, 6 years background with Cisco, right? And then solely work on the NLP domain. And then I have been involved in like almost 30 different projects till now. And then I'm so happy that some of them went to production. They are still in production, and then we are still trying to push more models to production, especially once we get this, after we getting this Gen AI frameworks, right? Yeah, it's as an like a short introduction, Richmond.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mustafa. And this is not the first time you're coming here. I think we did a session like this last year, around maybe this time, if I'm not mistaken. So you're regular at this point.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. On that note, let's not keep the audience waiting. Let's get to the presentation where you're gonna take us through what the Cisco support case management is, and then we'll go through a demo. Then I'll ask some questions that probably the audience are thinking.
Sure, thanks so much. So I will try to make it as short as possible in the demo, like the presentation set, that we can jump into the demo. I hope demo will work. And then I'm gonna give you a quick heads up, right? SCM AI capabilities, SCM support case management at Cisco, that we have a big team here to support the tickets. I mean, support case meaning the tickets from the case creation till the case is resolved, right? We have different AI tools, which I'm going to explain it in a bit. Some of them is generative, some of them is predictive, right? And in that SCM, we have a conversational design platform, which we call it BOF, Bot Communication Framework, that I'm going to touch upon that. And then the Retrieval-Augmented Generation solutions we have, some of them right now are in production, some of them is right now in staging environment, and then final testing is ongoing, and then they will go to the production as well. And then how we integrated the RAG with BUF as a service, right? So someone like from internally, someone from Cisco can come and build up their own RAG model with no code or low code, and then they can also start interact with their own like the documents. And again, this is the new topic, as you know, the Agentic Framework integration with BUF. We have two different right now, the Agentic Frameworks, Agentic AIs, AutoGen and LangGraph, that these are right now Agentic AI as a service integration into BUF. And then I will have a demo and then Q&As. So as a high level in the support case management, we have different models. Right now you see like some of them are internal, some of them are external, some of them is production deployed, some of them production ready. And you see that we have another legend which shows that, hey, some of them, like the classic AML models the classic two neural network architectures, some of them has Gen AI model itself, right? And then AI and ML combined, Gen AI combined, and we have the agentic AI as well. So we have chatbots in the BUF platform. Right now, we have more than 50 external chatbots which supports the customers. And then we have huge amount of traffic there, right? And then right now the chatbot is on Rasa platform that we have been switching from Rasa to like the Agentic Framework. In that above, as I said, we have RAG as a service platform, like is integrated, and we have different RAG models like the learning and certification, which is in production right now, WebEx Chat Assistant, which is really a heavy, huge RAG implementation, which I'm going to explain it end to end, right? And then we have the Agentic Framework as a service. I would like to call out one thing, Richmond. With the new LLMs and the Gen AI capabilities, I believe the data science lifecycle also got changed drastically. What I trying to say is that normally in the past we had an EDA, data extraction, and an EDA, and then model training and deploying the model in production and monitoring, right? And then again, like analyzing the output from the model, like performance analysis, again, like the create a data set to retrain the model and then train the model and then evaluate the model performance, so on and so forth. That life cycle to me is drastically changed if we are talking about the classification models. How? With the search engine, with the LLM capabilities, right? Like the keyword and then the semantic search capabilities, we can easily scale like the imbalanced data set with a hybrid search, right? Semantic and lexical search, and then re-ranking them as a classification model. If we deploy this model into production, whatever we do see in the backend, right? The model like the misclassified and input, we can easily go and check what's going on in the vector database, right? And then we can easily refine the data with no downtime that it will be reflected in UI. In this case, the vector database, especially the Mongo Atlas vector database, is our heavily used platform or tool that we do build these kind of like the classification models, classifiers, right? With different logic, not only the hybrid search, I'm not talking about the weighted RRF type of thing, but we have different calculation methods to identify the proper intent from the vector database. So in this case, we don't have this life cycle. What we need is that, hey, what's the output from the model, right? Just analyze it, and then where this output comes from, whether it's like the proper, let's say, prediction or wrong, we can easily identify which data point in that data set makes that trouble, and then we can fix it. Because as you know, like in academy or in like the trainings, whatever the data set you have, mostly well classified, right? Well, like the refined and then clean data set. But in industry, our main struggle and challenge is cleaning the data and then make sure that the data is properly labeled, right? Still, we have these kind of issues. And then, as I said, vector database is one of the good solutions for us at this stage. So in the diagnosis piece, right, Cisco Support Services, as you see, we have many tools like the summarization of a case, right? Like creating a knowledge base to identify what might be the best technical troubleshooting steps for a specific or technical input from the user. Say that in that lifecycle of a case, we got some technical questions from the user that like the engineer should go and check if it is not in his like the knowledge, right? Check the historical data, right? And in this case, in the past, we had the search tools that it brings up the kind of, raw data from the historical data set that engineers should have gone through and then analyze what was the issue. Now, with the new approach, RAG and type of things, right? We also like to recommend what might be the best technical troubleshooting steps to suggest the engineer, like not only the RAG, but one level above, right? And in this kind of use cases, we still leverage vector database, like the or graph or like the vector database, right? Whichever fits the requirements. So I'm switching. Yeah.
Mustafa, one thing I want to get really clear earlier on out of the way is within this system that you have at Cisco,
if you have any question,
you're using MongoDB as both the operational and vector database, right? MongoDB is hosting the vector data and the operational data for their system.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, right? So like vector databases is so famous with the RAG implementation, meaning that, hey, here is you dump the data into a vector database after chunking and splitting, right? Splitting and chunking, and then, hey, like bring up the relevant topics from these vector database, right? The chunks, and then pass to GenAI to generate the answer. This is one thing. How about the semi-structured data? Say that you have a text, and then we have a label of that text, right? And then I need to train a classifier. Like, say I have a few 100,000 samples, and then let's say 20 different classes, 20 different actions, and this data is imbalanced, right? We have majority classes, we have minority classes, that I need to train a classifier model, right? Multi-class classifier. And then whenever I deploy this model in production, I have no visibility. I know the output from the model, but why that model generated that output based on which data sample, right? If I, instead of going with this approach, and meanwhile you need to handle with this imbalanced data set, right? You need to make sure that model is not overfitting with the majority class, right? If you go with the vector database approach, you will see that, hey, this is the most relevant historical data set or data point which makes this misprediction, and go back and check whether this data is properly labeled or not, right? If it is the case, so why this data is so close to this one? We have like a wrong class, wrong action. So all these things we can also configure in the backend, and then instantly we do reflect in the production. And not only the RRF type of, let's say, search or re-rank approach we have, right? We do apply different techniques, which also puts more weight to the, let's say, minority class, right? So if, let's say, we just fetch the first 50 most relevant data points, right, samples, or like data from based on a query. So if we say that there are some minority classes, right, where we have less sample, then we just promote these ones to generate the final answer. And the good thing, it is not done yet. You can also pass the top end to GenAI to get the final result, which will generate better result than the classification model. And then you can also tweak with the prompt, right? Whatever you do in the backend, instantly it will be reflected in production. Say I have a misclassification, and then it makes an trouble right now. I don't need to wait the next release cycle. Hey, go to the vector database, clean that data, refine it. If the minority class does not pop up in top 5, create some synthetic samples, and then index it into the vector database, that it will pop up, right? With the similar inputs. We are good. Now we can see the whole process in the backend, and then easily take an action.
Yeah,
that will be constant in production.
Thank you for that explanation. And one thing, someone is asking, hey, can we ask questions in the chat? Yes, you can ask questions in the chat. If you have any question based on what Mustafa is showing on the screen and saying, feel free to ask the question, and we'll answer it when we have some time to answer it. But yeah, do ask questions on the chat. Mustafa, can you show us that buff system that you're going to talk about?
Yeah, like the bot unification framework, as I said, it's a secure environment which is on-prem and ready for cloud. And then data encryption at rest and in motion, and authentication and authorization is all configured, right? And in that bot, we have the bot, as I said, we have more than 50 bots, and most of them are customer facing. So just give a pause here, right? Internal and external, two different things. Let me give you an example. If I want to spin up an internal AI tool, right? Kind of as a data scientist and AI engineer, I'm a bit, relaxed that, hey, if something happens, it will not harm the company's like the reputation. There will be no incident at all, right? It will not get escalated. At least someone will come to me and say that, hey, the prediction is wrong, and then could you please go and check it? If it is a customer-facing model, then we have lots of parameters, many parameters we need to take into account, especially with the Gen AI, right? So we need to just consider how these guardrails are properly identified, that there will be no incident in production, right? That's the reason why at the beginning we were a bit conservative that, hey, the RASA intent identifier, intent classifier has the guardrails anyway, but this is a kind of trade-off, right? Like the mechanic or human-like answer from the AI, or the guardrails, how you should like to configure these guardrails, these two different things, and then you need to like balance these different, let's say, considerations in a way that it will work fine. In our use case, the BUFF platform right now is a hybrid solution. We have the RASA, like the classic AI ML, conversational chat, and then we have the Gen AI, like the conversation AI, right? And then for the conversation AI, we do also identify the guardrails in a way that it will identify the prompt injection, gibberish, profanity, like the other, let's say, domains, like, for instance, military, terrorism, like economics, human rights, gender equality, all that stuff. And in the RAG, whatever we created, right? We created custom answers. Like, for instance, both like the RAG in a bot, like integrated, generates different answer for input, which is identified as terrorism related, or it is mental health related. We say that, sorry, you are struggling like a mental problem, blah, blah. So for each different guardrails, we like customize different answers to make sure that the bot like is more empathic, right? This is what I'm trying to say. So, and it's scalable. So it's built to handle peak usage, and then extensible for handle multiple use cases, leverage common skills and knowledge. So you will also see that we have the knowledge libraries, tool libraries, right? And then the action libraries that you can easily configure it and create your own bot. Anyone in Cisco can come and build a simple, this is like the in quote, simple use case with no code. If it is more complex, like you have workflows, you have API calls, multiple API calls in one session, right? And then you need to also like create all these logics, right? Logic gates in the back end. Then in RASA, yes, you need to go through the code base and then identify all these skills in skill bundles. And in Gen AI, like the agentic framework, you should also identify either you will go with single agent, multiple agent, what kind of tools you need to integrate all these agents. As you see, we have different technologies here, AWS there, because we keep some data in AWS, Atlas Vector, and the MongoDB is our main, like the databases for hybrid search. Whenever we have an FAQ, right, most of the time we do go with this Atlas Vector Search, MongoDB Vector Search, and then we have ChatGPT, AutoGen, LangGraph, all that different technologies and the tools. So I'm switching to how this bot unification framework impacts, right? So from 2019 till now, you see that this is from FY24, but roughly we had 1.2 million unique users. And then product bookings is above $500 million. And then the call or case deflection, around 1.4 million. And then the estimated cost savings is around $30 million. So it's a huge platform, external, like a customer-facing platform that it runs for almost half a decade. So this is the BUFF admin UI, right? And you see on the left-hand side, we have LLM knowledge, and then we have the agentic AI that you can go and build your own RAG, as well as your own agentic AI under different, let's say, frameworks. So whenever you go to the buff LLM knowledge, you will see 3 different UIs. The first one is the main information about your RAG, like what's the name of your RAG, what's the description of your RAG, who will do contributors. You can also add more contributors across your company, across Cisco, that these guys will come and test the model, right? And then another thing, the toggle, you see that you can enable query at KB articles, knowledge articles, meaning that you can easily start interacting with your documents. And FAQ generation is another thing. You can also let the Gen AI to create FAQs from your documents, right? How to type of questions that Gen AI also go. Other than this enable query, on top of that, it can also generate FAQ questions for you. And the other thing is that we have a custom prompt, and you can also enable your whatever the default, right? You can also switch to your custom prompt that you can go and modify your prompt. Gen AI configuration on the right hand side, we have the buff also offers LLM API keys for GPT type of models like GPT-4, 4.0, 4.0 mini, right? You can also bring up your own API keys that if you want to go with the Gemini or different LLM models, right? You can also configure in a Gen AI configuration page. And finally, at a new document page, you can come up and upload your documents. You can come up and upload your link, right? The SharePoint link, whatever the content resides, right? You can go there. And then if you want to go with the bulk upload of the links, we have an Excel sheet that you need to download it and then add all your URLs, right? And then upload it again and then trigger that process. Then you will have all these contents beneath that that link is processed and indexed into a vector database that you will start interacting with your document. Here, as you see, right, no code, low code, knowledge article generation, contextual understanding in RAG, which is another thing. So this is not just the ask question and get the answer, ask question, get the answer. You can also let the Gen AI or the RAG keeps n number of previous interaction with you and then the AI in memory, right? So it understands the previous context, and then based on this previous context, it also generates the answer.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to touch on is for those people that are just maybe joining us now, what Mustafa is going through is an agentic framework that he built for internal users within Cisco to be able to build any agent for any use case. So we're just going through some of the UI components. And Mustafa, I have some questions I want to ask around, were you the one that decided what the UI looked like, and how did you come to the components of it? How did you come to your decision if you were the one that decided what the UI looked like?
So UI, so basically, I mean, it's an evolving process, right? Right now, the current UI, you have what we did, what we thought that it must be user friendly, and then anyone who has no the RAG or Gen AI knowledge or experience, I'm not the experience, right? Should come to might come to our platform, right? Buff and spin up a RAG model with no code, without getting lost there, right? It is really simple. Hey, name it, give me the definition, and then description. What do you want? Chat with your documents, create FAQ, or go with your own custom prompt. And do you have an API key? Yes, no. If you have the API key, please provide, right? And right now, one thing I missed here, right? You see all the document types we do process, like the PDF, HTML, MP4, PPTX, and then the Word documents. That if you have a video that you want to create a RAG from that video, you can also come to this platform, and up to 300 MB, you could upload your video that we will transcribe it and then index it in a vector database. Right? This is pretty simple to me UI that people comes and builds their own RAG solutions and start interacting with it.
Yeah, it's very intuitive, and I'll probably ask some questions around the stack you're using. How are you doing speaker diarization when you're from the audio? We can talk about some of the technologies later, but I'll let you carry on with the presentation so we can maybe get to the demo as well.
So sure, Buff Reg as a service in production. As you see, right, this is the WCA model, like a Webex chat assistant LLM model, which is a RAG implementation, and it's right now in production. If you go to the help.webex.com and then log in, then you can utilize this model. And there's another one, learning and certification model, which is also in production, that we constantly monitor what's going on in this model. I'm just going to show you like the backend, right? This is not just only like, hey, go through the logs in production space, or like the go to the logs in the database and check it, right? Whatever is happening here. Once we get a positive feedback, once we get a negative feedback, once we get an unanswered questions, right? Model might also cannot generate the answer, right? Might not generate the answer, and then we also get a notification that, hey, this answer is not, we don't have an, like the GenAI couldn't create an answer for that specific question. And in a daily basis, these two models have a data ingestion pipeline, auto data ingestion pipeline, that we do identify which source documents are modified, deleted, or newly created, that these are reflected in the vector database. So sorry for that. I'm just going to give you a really quick technical architecture of the WCA, right? The RAG. So 3 pillars here: indexing, inference, and caching. By the way, our RAG solutions have caching capability as well. So 2 different API calls from the data controller. One of them is for the metadata, the other one is for the content, and then we combine them, meaning that we do generate the answer based on the persona, based on the product, based on the operating system for that specific domain, right? If the customer is like the end user is an administrator, the answer is different than the user answer or the partner answer, right? So all these metadata and then the data, like the text data, is combined and incorporated in a way that it goes to the vector database after getting the embeddings, right? Then we do like the filter out the search, or narrow down the search based on the metadata we get from the user, that we hit the proper chunks to generate the answer. And the guardrails is another thing, as I said, right? Guardrails, right now, we identified 15, 16 different domains of these guardrails that like the model identifies and generates different answers. Once the answer, like this is basically, and the caching, I'm just going to explain what caching means and how we do it, right? So these are the feedback spaces in Webex. So whenever we get a negative feedback in production on non-prod environment, right? So we directly reflect this feedback in a Webex space, and then the SMEs also see it, right? Hey, if you look at here, we do see a negative feedback, and the question was, how do I generate a meeting usage report for a user? And GenAI generated an answer, and if you see here, right, we have the persona administrator, product, Webex meetings, and webinars. There was no applications device. Persona flag true, meaning that, hey, it generated that answer for the for that specific persona administrator. We have a fallback persona flag as well. Say that this answer, the user came as an administrator and we couldn't find any answer for it. Right? We directly switch, automatically switch to the user, one level below, to generate that answer. If it is user and we don't have any answer for that, then we just search for administrator and generate the answer. And then these unanswered questions for that specific persona also is shown in the Webex space. And you see here we have 2 things, right? Discard and accept for positive feedback and negative feedback. This is for the SMEs to justify the feedback. Hey, like it might be an arbitrary feedback for both of them, right? For instance, the query came from like the GenAI, and then the customer, even the answer was good, customer didn't like the narrative, right? They gave a negative feedback. In this case, SME also sees this and then either justifies that, hey, customer is right, and this is not the answer of this question, and accepts it, or discuss it. Hey, this answer looks good, and then there is an arbitrary feedback here, right? So, for instance, if it is talking about the positive feedback, and then we get a justification from the SME, right? Hey, this positive feedback is good. We directly index it into the cache vector database. And next time, if the customer comes with similar questions, not identical, but similar questions, based on the similarity between question and answer, we do provide this answer from cache, right? So we get a cache, like the output from cache, and then customer didn't like it. Maybe the answer was not that one or that specific question, and give a negative feedback. In this case, if this negative feedback is justified by the SME, hey, customer is right, then we delete this feedback, like the question answer pair from cache, in a way that next time customer comes with similar questions or identical questions, we are not going to hit the cache vector database, but it will go to the reg pipeline. And as you see here, right, in the big, like the screen, in a daily basis, we do run an auto ingestion pipeline, which identifies which articles deleted from cache vector database, which articles updated, the content-wise updated in the cache vector database, and which articles recently added. As of, I think, yesterday, we had one article which is recently indexed into the cache vector database. I'm just skipping this slide.
One thing I wanted to ask Mustafa is, what is the time to live of content within the cache?
So, okay, good question. Now I'm coming to that piece. So this is the cache, right? I'm just showing a schema in cache. So we have a persona, product, all these metadata is mapping, keeping cache, right? And then we have, like you see here, different queries. This is a kind of a synthetic, but like do not look at the timeline. But the first one got a positive feedback from the user, and then the engineer also justified it, right? And we have all these documents, source document, external IDs, what was the score, the feedback was positive, and we create an hash code, right? A unique hash code. If you go up here, right, so you will see that there is a hash code here, right, just here, hash code, which is unique for that specific input. So, and then it identified as an primary variation status, okay? So next time customer came up with a similar question, how I change my virtual background during a meeting, which is very similar, I want to update my virtual background in a meeting, then the answer came from cache, right? Now, customer gives another positive feedback. Hey, this answer is good, but under different questions. Now, in this case, for the same metadata, this answer comes to the same hash, because like the answer came from cache vector database with the same hash code as a secondary. And the third one comes secondary and secondary, right? Right now we have one primary, maybe 10 different variations of that question as a secondary row. Why it is important? Now I'm coming to your question. Say if this source document is updated, right? What we are going to do with cache? So we have hundreds of questions, right? Then we just only focus on the primary one, where this answer is created based on this document, like source document A. For instance, we have 200 questions. Out of 200 questions, maybe 50 questions is created based on the source document, and this source document is updated, right? Or deleted. Now, go to the only primary and then replicate the same scenario. Hey, persona is user, product is WebEx meetings and webinars. Here is the question. And now we have a new answer because the cache vector database is updated. We don't have that document anymore, or that document content is updated right now. The new answer is created. Two things. The first thing is that we evaluate the model, right? We evaluate the model based on some, like the answer relevancy, context relevancy, and faithfulness. If we have the ground truth answer, then we have more, let's say, metrics, right? If everything is good, and then the score is above that threshold, we directly reflect this answer, the new answer in cache vector database, not only the primary, but the secondaries, right? Like the whole bunch of 50 questions, right, got updated with the new answer. If it is not, right, it couldn't pass the evaluator, then it goes to the SME. And in that cache validation, like the WebEx space, SME also sees that, hey, I have a new question, like the question from cache and a new answer, right? Because the content got changed, or we have a new, like the content got deleted. Now, once the SME endorse it, right? Hey, this answer is also good. It is directly reflected in cache vector database. Whenever we only process the primary, but we reflect the answer through the secondaries as well. This is how we manage the cache vector database with the dynamic data processing. So if you yeah.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to ask is very succinctly, right? Can you summarize what the benefit of using semantic cache within this framework, what the benefit has been? Like, if you can just mention maybe 2 benefits.
So one benefit is like the latency. Still, by the way, to be honest, I will be honest with you guys. So we have GPT-4 right now for the WCA. We are switching to the GPT-4o, right? Everything got changed. I mean, like the GPT-4 will be like the commissioned or depreciated by 6th of June, right? Then we need to switch from GPT to GPT-4o or 4o mini or Gemini. So we need to have an extensive testing, right? To see how the model performs, like with the content we have. GPT-4, as you know, is a slow model, right? We are seeing like a really high latency, that whenever we cache it, the output from cache vector database is like sub-second. If it goes through the RAG, it takes 15 to 20 seconds to generate the answer based on the length of the prompt, right? So how many documents we do process for that specific answer, then it also impacts the latency. This is one thing. And the other thing, as you know, this is the cost. So say we have admin, like the personas as well, right? If it is administrator, we hit the vector database, get the data, and then hit the GenAI. GenAI says that, sorry, I couldn't find the answer. Switch to the user, get vector database from the data, and then like hit the GenAI again. And finally, GenAI says that here is the answer. So like roughly we do pass around 5,000 to 6,000 tokens as an input, and completion, as you know, 300 to 500 tokens as a completion, is that each time we do pass up to 10,000 tokens to GenAI, right? And then if this model is heavily used, then hey, here is the cache. But the answer comes from the cache, and then what we will do is that just make sure that based on the new content, right, the updated living content cache is kept up to date.
So one thing I wanted to also touch on, just for the sake of time, we'll talk about we'll go into the demo. And when we go into the demo, I really want us to talk about how you view memory within agentic system, your perspective of it, and some of the techniques that you're using to implement and manage memory within agentic system. So I'll hand it over to you, then we can really go into that topic.
Okay, so like now, I was gonna explain the agent, but let me show you a few examples. Like, okay, if I go.
And while we're waiting for things to get started, Pedro, could you please remove the screen sharing just while we get it up? Okay, thanks. One thing I wanted to, while we're waiting, guys, you can ask any questions you have on the chat. Mustafa, hey, give me a thumbs up once you're ready to go with the demo. I'll keep the audience warm. Okay. We've just gone through a bunch of components and technique. Mustafa's used to build one of the agentic framework within Cisco, and which Mustafa mentioned powers over 50 chatbots in production today. So you can go to the help.webex.com and you will be able to use some of these chatbots that are built within MongoDB, using MongoDB as that operation on vector database. So Mustafa, are we good for the demo?
Yeah, right now I'm just gonna show a few things and then we will start with the demo, right?
Okay, excellent.
So as I discussed, we have different notifications in the WebEx space to inform our stakeholders. Hey, we have two different models, non-prod and prod, two different environments, and then people go and ask questions, right? And then that's the reason why we have two different, let's say, environments. Under these environments, we have different notification spaces. For instance, this is unanswered question. So if the GenAI cannot answer this question, right? So we directly generate a report and then let our stakeholders know that, hey, for that specific one, and then GenAI couldn't generate an answer. These are the source documents and then person of fallback attempt true, meaning that it tried to use the user and then it couldn't generate the answer and then it switched to the administrator. So there is no administrator related notification here, meaning that we generated that answer for the administrator, but user failed, right? And so this is a UI where we test the model. So if I come up here and then, as I said, normally in production, we has this knowledge, right? KYC, who is the end customer, either it's a user, administrator, or partner. And then we know what kind of product they want to go with, right? Or operating system or devices, right? For the sake of the the demo, I think it's a bit, as you see, one more thing. Right now it's GPT-4, and then we have another space that this also runs GPT-4o. So the our stakeholders and then go and they check the performance of the model from both aspects, right? If I say that how to change, sorry, my virtual background. So what it does is that the first one is the current model in production, which is an FAQ model, right? And then we do see what kind of outputs from the FAQ model, which is basically a classification model. Right now, it is non-prod environment. You might see a kind of latency here, right? But what I'm trying to say is that this caching will eliminate this latency. I mean, if you are in the GenAI domain, right? If you create these kind of RAG pipelines, this is not just only send the data to GenAI to generate the answer, and then, hey, here is the answer, right? This is not the case. I mean, this WCA has a huge configuration in the backend. Everything, whatever you see here, this is end-to-end homegrown solution. We didn't use, other than the MongoDB Vector database, we didn't use any third-party orchestrators like the LangChain or LangChain, like Llama Index. The data ingestion pipeline is end-to-end customized. Like the embeddings is open source. I can accept that. And the vector database and GenAI. The rest is end-to-end our homegrown solution. So this UI is created for our engineers to go and check the model performance, right? So they can see what kind of source documents we used, and then they can also check, right? And then the prompt, what was the prompt we passed to GenAI, like the document base, and then what's the computation time, right? Guardrails, vector search, data extraction, output consolidator. You see, it took 2.36. So there are many things going on in the backend to make sure that the answer is properly narrowed down based on the requirements. And GenAI also generated the answer in 30 seconds, the total 30 seconds. And the input token we have around 100 tokens we use for this one. If I say, I found what I need, right? So it goes to the cache vector database right now, but not cache vector, sorry. It comes up here, post the feedback space. No. Hey, now we have an answer, how to change my virtual background. So the response is that you change virtual background in macOS, iOS, and Android, and these are the user, all that things, right? Hash code is here, transcript, and I said, hey, this is a good answer. Now, it should go to the cache vector database, right, to index it into the cache. Right now, it is indexed. If I check my background. Yeah, it's right now indexed. Let me. Okay, so if I come up here, I need to change my virtual background. So oh, sorry. It's computer is a bit.
No, it's all good. And one thing I like about your UI is you're really showing the end user all information in regards to the process, right? The computation time, the prompt, everything. It really helps. It's very intuitive.
Yeah, like same thing now. I just went with the I need to change my virtual background. The first one was it has a typo mistake, by the way, how to change my virtual background, right? Right now I have a different query, but the answer also came from cache vector database. If you see here, right, the output came from cache vector database in 0.31 seconds. So if I give a negative feedback, same thing will happen. It will go to the WebEx space, and like if I still need help, I need to also like justify it, right? And then I will just give that, hey, this is for test, right? And then send this negative feedback, and it will come to the negative feedback space, and the engineer will see, hey, there is a negative space here, negative feedback here, right? And then it should either discard or accept it. Accept meaning that, hey, there is no answer, like clean the cache vector database, right? Next time we don't want to see this answer from cache, but go to the classic RAG pipeline. If discard, meaning that keeping cache, right? Keeping cache, and then we are good with this answer. This is an arbitrary feedback. So now let me switch to the agentic framework. I will not have too much demo in agentic framework, but I'm just going to show you how we built the agentic framework in Buff, right?
Yeah, so it's absolutely fine, because we can also talk about some of the ideas that you have for what you be building and what you have built. So wherever you can't show, we'll fill in the gaps with words.
Okay, sure. So as I said, this is a UI. You can come up and then build your own agentic framework with no code or low code. No code meaning that if you don't need any tools like the API calls to make, right, then you are good to go. You can spin up an agent here, and then you can go to the LLM knowledge space and then create your own RAG pipeline and connect with it, right? So these are all RAGs right now in the Buff currently our internal users created, right? So if I go to the licensing RAG and then go to the edit, right? Whatever I showed you, you will see here. So these are the GenAI configurations and as well as the prompt, right? And then you can start interacting with your licensing bot ASAP. So these are the documents uploaded here. And then I can start asking the questions. As I show you, enable debug mode, same thing with the UI, that you will be able to see what was the question, what was the answer, what was the source documents, prompt, and the computation time. And enable previous context, as I said, it also takes into account the previous conversation and it generates the answer based on conversation. So this is one thing. Say that you created your RAG here, and then you want to create an agentic AI, right? And then you want to integrate this your RAG into here. Now you come up here and then create agents. Oh, why? I mean, sorry. Let me make it dev. Right. So here you have different LLM models, right? The Bridge IT is our own Cisco LLM model, which is basically used for internal, right? That you can query with an API with the GPT-4, GPT-4o, GPT-4o mini, and then we will have the Gemini as well. So these are the LLMs. Yeah, you can configure it with your APIs. And in the tools, we have different tools. We are going to create right now we have been creating an tools library. So for instance, if you want to get your meeting recording, right? Yes, you had a WebEx meeting and this tool is ready, right? So yeah, hey, come up here, and then no need to create a tool, like go and then fetch it or integrate it in your agent. Like this tool is ready, and then find licenses by name, case details, right? We have many tools here that we will constantly pile up. Hey, what do you think? Hey, we need to have, by the way, there will be a role-based access control. This is the thing. No one like just go and get the like the very highly confidential data with these tools. It is not the case, right? But you can also identify, hey, come up here and then say that device status, right? Hey, I have a device status tool here that I can integrate with my
one question I wanted to ask Mustafa is, where are you storing the JSON schema, the schema definition of the tools?
Yeah, the schema definition of these tools and everything is stored in the MongoDB.
So you're basically using MongoDB as like a toolbox, basically.
Yes, in the backend. Like whatever you see here, most of the credentials and then all these, like the critical data, is stored in a MongoDB. So I mean, or Atlas Vector Search or Vector Database, right? So
yeah,
in the backend, I mean, I'm not like exaggerating, but in the backend, MongoDB, Atlas Vector Search, and the MongoDB itself is heavily leveraged.
So one thing about, like, I just want to talk about that design pattern, because that's something I've seen a lot of developers use, is where they use MongoDB to store the JSON schema of the tools so you can scale the tool use. And the reason why you do this is because the LLMs, I think OpenAI's guidance is just you give around 10 to 20 tools for the LLMs to be aware of for your tool calling or function calling capabilities. But when you actually put everything within a toolbox within MongoDB, and you can use vector search to get the relevant tools at inference time, that way you can just scale the amount of tools your system is aware of, like Mustafa has done here. So that's using MongoDB as a toolbox, your database as a toolbox. Just wanted to like double click into that. But I think for the last couple minutes we have, what is one of the most important things that one of the key things you want to show the audience? And then the second question is, what's the most important thing you want like an AI engineer to take away going through building an agentic framework? Okay,
like agentic framework is one thing, but generally, what I would like to emphasize and call out that like non-prod and prod different things, internal and external different things. Prod and external is different, like the different things, right? Like right now with the Gen AI, UAT time increased exponentially, right? Like the testing the model, like the going back and then identifying the issues and then all the stuff, it is really, really longer process than ever, right? So all these guardrails and integrations and make sure that the model performs as expected in production as a customer-facing model, then you need to spend like even 3-4 times than before, right? So during this, like I think like the model creation is a bit shorter, I would say, but UAT, and then make sure that like the model is ready for production, it takes too long, right? This is one thing. And the other thing is that it's still like the black box for us, that each time we get different answers from Gen AI. You can tweak with the parameters like the temperature, top key, like anyway, at the end of the story, if even you pass the same input to Gen AI, right? The output sometimes gets really quite different than the previous ones, like quite different than what we are expecting. This is another thing. And then that's the reason why a close monitoring mechanism should be established before putting this model into production. An agentic framework, it is the really scariest, awesome tool, right? I will say that in the past, there were many things that we couldn't even imagine to make it happen. Right now, these kind of things can be done instantly with the agentic frameworks, agentic AI, right? So let me give you an example. One of the with Gen AI, I mean, not agentic, but Gen AI, we used to try what kind of commitments an engineer did to users, right? Say, hey, I'm going to troubleshoot your problem and get back to you by the end of today, like in 2 days, early next week, right? Just think about, right, without Gen AI, how hard and really long process to identify these sentences from an email, and then without like the rule-based approach and everything, and then identify what was the commitment, troubleshooting, update you, right? Or whatever, like have a meeting with you, right? And then identify what's the timeline. Hey, when the engineer gave that commitment, and then just put an agenda that we will also notify the engineer before that, like the deadline due, right? And we will say that, hey, here 15 minutes later, you need to have a WebEx meeting with this one, because like just think about an engineer can handle, like they normally handles 15 to 20 different cases in one day. Just types an email, goes to another one and checks what's the troubleshooting steps, give a commitment here, and then finally he might, or the engineer might get lost, right? Hey, what are the commitments you identified? Right now, it's really instant, very easy process to generate it and then create that pipeline. And hey, engineer, here's your like the commitment agent or commitment assistant that it will identify these things. Even you should not go with, like, you might not go with the agentic framework, but you can spin up and like the single agent, which will identify your, like, analyze your inputs and identify that, hey, this is the customer, this is the commitment you gave that customer, and then how I'm gonna keep it, right? And I'm gonna also like notify you before the deadline.
Yeah.
So all these things can be done, and then there is no limit right now. So whatever you like, you think you can build with this agentic framework, like with these agents, right? And then if you think about that, hey, we have a tools library. In that tools library, we have hundreds of tools. And just think about that, everything is like the JSON schemas are captured, and then you can go and like update these schemas that you will like you see it in UI, right? And what you need to do is that, hey, I need 4 or 5 tools, and this is, I'm gonna like integrate with my agentic framework, multi-agent, one agent, and I would like to also communicate with another agent or with another tool. We have protocols as well, right? A to A, agent to agent, and then you can go with the MCP to communicate with the other tools from different domains, from different entities. Just think about it, an enterprise level network that these agents, these AI tools will communicate with each other to like increase the productivity, decrease the costs, right?
Exactly.
It's awesome.
I was gonna say you hit the nail on the head with definitely productivity increase, productivity gains across all fronts for both developers, for both the enterprise in general, developer productivity as well for us that are building these tools. We're moving a lot faster. We're able to build faster to help optimize workflows within our organization. Mustafa, I can't thank you enough for sharing yet again more insightful more insightful experiences that you've had building RAG applications, agentic applications, and AI applications in general. I think every time we talk, I come away with so many learnings. Now I'm gonna go try some different techniques you're showing with the semantic cache and the synthetic generation of data. So, is there anything you want to say as we close off with this session?
So, just one thing, right? In the past, like it was a learning curve, if I'm not wrong, like steep learning curve to get up to speed with AI. Right now, this is not the case. Anyone can get up to speed with AI really in a short time and then build their own agents with some agentic IDEs as well, right? Just to our like the developers, our friends in this domain, just make sure that your hands are dirty with AI. Right? This is what I'm like to emphasize.
That's a good way to close out. Thanks again, Mustafa, for taking the time to speak with us today. And I can't wait to have you again, maybe later in the summer or later this year.
Sure. Sure, Rishmat. Thank you so much again for having me, to give this opportunity to show our use cases, right?
Thanks a lot, guys. And thanks, guys, for joining us today. We will see you again very soon. We have webinars, we have YouTube shows, so stay tuned. There is more good content coming from MongoDB. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.